Welcome to Virginia Webinars. Tonight's webinar is about Power Pivot techniques. We're excited that you are all here. We have a full house. We have 100 attendees registered for this webinar. It's a 1-hour webinar. Let's get started with a couple of housekeeping issues. My name is Ayman Sadiq. You can see my bio on the screen. You can get a full bio when you go to viftraining.com. Some housekeeping issues. This webinar is being recorded. You will receive a link that will take you back to the whole hour of the webinar so you can review and practice. Feel free to share with your colleagues. You can re-watch it at any time you want. We're going to upload it also to elearning.viftraining.com. Take advantage of the Q&A, the questions and answers. We'll be more than happy to answer all your questions. At the end, there's a 1-minute survey. Please take that time to do the survey. You can always go to viftraining.com to find other webinars and courses of your interest. So let me take you through the hierarchy of pivot tables. It is important to understand where Power Pivot fits in the hierarchy of data analytics. You see, when we start with Excel, using Excel, there are 4 levels of using Excel. Level 1 has to do with what we call massaging and reporting and analysis. Massaging has to do with normalizing data. The data is unclean, they're cluttered, they're noisy, they're dirty data. We take them, we massage them. We apply tools, formulas, and techniques to cleanse them. Once we do that, we hand them over to the pivot tables. And in pivot tables, we can perform all kind of analysis. There are actually 19 rules of pivot tables. And once you go over the 19 rules, you'll be able to do slice and dice, 9 ways to Sunday, all kind of reports, almost all kind of reports and analysis. And you can, by the end of level 1, you'll be able to create a dynamic dashboard, Excel-based dashboard. Then we move on to level 2 in Excel. And level 2 has to do with modeling, integration, and automation. Modeling has to do with what-if analysis, where you can do business what-if analysis, scenario analysis. And then you talk about integration, linking Excel with external sources. And the third one has to do with creating repetitive routines for things that takes you 5-10 minutes every day. And they're cumbersome, you know, or they're repetitive. They're very boring. So you create a routine using VBA for application in Excel that perform that task for you, such as maybe emailing reports or emailing files to specific people on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. Once we finish that, then we have completed our competency of using pivot tables. And if you recall, just a couple of minutes ago, I said there are 19 rules of pivot tables. Once you get your hands around pivot tables, you will be able to move up to what we call Power Pivot. I'm going to put that on the side for a second. I'm going to come back to it and spend the rest of the hour talking about it. We move up to what we call Power BI. So after we finish Power Pivot, then the next level for me is called Power BI. And Power BI is a tool in Microsoft that was introduced in 2015 that allows you to take all the information in Excel and all other kind of sources, and you can create not an Excel-based dashboards, but a professional, you know, industry standard, gold standard dashboards that are very dynamic, that you can share with whomever you like. You put it on a URL on the net, and people can follow that dashboard that updates, you know, every second or every minute. This, what we call, is the hierarchy of data analytics using Excel. We're focusing on that level 3, which is Power Pivot. And why are we using Power Pivot? So the question really becomes, if you want to talk about Power Pivot, you need to understand, why can't I use just pivot tables? Then the question that presents itself, why Power Pivot and not pivot tables? There are 3 fundamental reasons why I'm going to use Power Pivot and not pivot table. The first one has to do with rows and columns. In Excel, pivot table can handle up to 16,384 columns and 1,048,576 rows. I counted them, 1, 2, 3, 4. That is not enough for some of you. Some of you might be working with millions of rows, a big databases. So Power Pivot comes in, steps in, say, okay, you want more than 1,000,000 row? I can handle it. You want 200 million rows, 300 million rows? Not a problem. I can do that. The second, formulas. In pivot tables, I can do formulas, you know, with the tool that says analyze field items and sets, calculated fields, and I can create nice formulas there, but they're very primitive. They're very limited. I can only do with very basic formula types. Power Pivot comes in, says, oh, you want to create formulas? I'm going to give you something called DAX, data analysis expressions, and I can allow you to create all kinds of formulas. And we're going to talk about this in the next few minutes. The third fundamental is multiple sources. If I have multiple sheets, multiple files, different locations, and I want to pull them together in a one pivot table so that I can create my dashboard or my analysis, I cannot do that in pivot table. In Power Pivot, I can do that using the data model. So Power Pivot comes to remove that glass ceiling, if you will. There are things you want to achieve with the data that you have, but you can't. You know where you're going. You know that you have 5 different sources. You want to put them together so you can slice and dice. But you can't do that with pivot tables. So Power Pivot comes in. You know that the data is huge, 10 million rows. I cannot put it in Excel pivot table. So what am I going to do? Power Pivot comes in. Formulas. I want to create some nice formulas, sophisticated formulas, exciting formulas. I cannot do that with pivot table. Power Pivot comes to play. This is the screen of Power Pivot. This is the ribbon that you are going to see on your Excel. So in that ribbon, we talk about the manage, which is the data model. That has to do with the unlimited rows. We have the measures, and those are the advanced calculations, the DAX formulas. And I have here listed a DAX function reference you can always go to, and you can pull all kind of information on all formulas that you like. And then we have what we call the detect or add to the data model. Those two, it has to do with multiple sources. That's where I can pull in different sources in Power Pivot. KPIs are my key performance indicators. It also has to do with calculations. And then the data model is the data model that we're working with that will pull information from different sources. Okay, wonderful. So moving on with the Power Pivot now, we are going to go to our game plan. So what we are going to do is we're going to install Power Pivot, take a look at the data model, perform some calculated columns, look at the diagram view, create our pivot table, do a couple of measures, and then create a KPI. So once you do that, then everything is okay. So here we go. Here's Excel. The Power Pivot should show up on your screen. Now, if you don't have that, we can actually install it from the developer. If you don't have the developer, then when you right click on any of the items on your ribbon, and you go customize ribbon, you see that there's something called developer there. So when you click on the developer, you get the developer installed there. In the developer, there's something called COM add-ins. In COM add-ins, there's a Microsoft Power Pivot for Excel. You click OK, and you get your Power Pivot. And this is the ribbon for Power Pivot. So now the point here is the following. I'm going to share with you the following folder. Bear with me a second. So I got this folder here that includes Here we go. That includes 2 workshops. So I'm going to work with you on the budget data, and then the other one I will send it to you, with all the information that is that belongs to this webinar, so you can work on it. So here's the budget data. In budget data, as you can see, we have 5 different files, and these files have specific information. I'd like to create some kind of report, some analysis on transactions that happen, that has to do with actuals and budget, that has to do with expense descriptions, that has to do with departments and divisions, months and quarters and years, and cities and countries. Each of these files have specific information, and they're separate files. They're not different sheets in one file, they're separate files. So I want a mechanism that will allow me to take all that information and put them in one pivot table. I cannot do that with pivot tables. I cannot do that with pivot tables. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all that in our data model. And here's how we're going to do that. So I'm going to go to the manage. And you can see here in the manage, I'm going to take this out just to illustrate for you. In that manage, I come up with something called Power Pivot for Excel. The intermediary, if you will, tool that allows me to pull multiple sources, not yet put them in Excel, but take all these sources, put them in pivot table inside Excel, which makes it Power Pivot. So I'm going to go to from other sources, and then I'm going to scroll down to something called Excel. All right, now we're going to go to the data model. So I'm going to click on Manage. From other sources, and there are a lot of sources here that you can pull from. I'm going to pull from an Excel. Next, it says friendly connection name, Excel. The file path, I'm going to browse. I'm going to click on cities. I can select any one. It doesn't, the order is not important here. Cities. I know that in my table, I have headers. The first row are the column headers. So I'm going to click on it. I can test the connection. It says test connection succeeded. Click OK. I'm going to go next. That's the source table. It's called cities, the sheet. Finish. I have actually imported 11 rows. Close. And it'll show up here. Now I'm in data model now. And I'm going to keep everything in the data model. So you notice here, cities. So I'm going to go back again and pull in the other sources. So I'm going to go Excel. I'm going to browse dates now. Use first row as column header. Next. Finish. 12 rows. Click OK. Here we go. Dates. Third file. Browse. I'm going to go to department and division names. Same thing. Column header. Finish. 25 rows transferred. Here we go. So you can see cities, dates, department reference. I got 2 more. Expense description. Next. Finish. Got here 61 rows. And then the last one is my transaction file. So in the transaction file, it says, you know, which table you want. Well, I want one of the tables. Both tables are the same. One is XLNM and the other one is transactions. So I want this one. That's my friendly name, the source table. I'm going to click OK. And you can see here's 7,457 rows. So I'm going to click close. So now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to go back to my install Power Pivot. We're done. Data model. as you can see here, that's a data model. Here's the data model. Now, after the data model, I need to do what is called calculated columns. So I'm going to put this for a second on the side. I'm going to jump to diagram view. Then I'm going to come back to calculated columns. But let me show you how you want to manage your data. Now, I have 5 different sources. I'm going to go to diagram view. And I find there are 5 sources. Here's the challenge. One attendee asked if we can share the files, and I'll be more than happy to share all the files with you. It's just, you know, we're going at a pace. This is a webinar, so we're going at a pace that is much faster than trying to catch up with me. So this will all be recorded. Once we finish, we're going to give you the files. We're going to give you all the links. We're going to give you the video, so you can go practice at your, you know, leisure time, you know, what, you know, so you can stop, you can pause, you can rewind at your, you know, on your comfort zone, if you will. So you'll be able to master the competencies there.
Thank you for answering, Ayman.
Okay. So let me go back here now to the Power Pivot. We said we have 5 of these. So from a fundamental understanding point of view, from a strategy or tactic point of view, you want to take the transaction file, the file that contains information, and that is the transaction file. And that transaction file includes about 7,000 something rows. And then you want to put the references around it. So you want to design something like this just to make you better understand how you're designing your architect on the data connection, if you will. The references are all one-to-many relationship. In other words, the expense code, each expense code here is only repeated 1 time. Here we go, watch. Expense code, expense reference. See, the 50,000 is only repeated 1 time. There's no more than once. The city is 100 is just repeated once. But alternatively, on the other side, transactions, the 100 are repeated maybe hundreds of times. So the relationship between the tables or the sources that you have should always be in the center. You will have the transactions where the transaction happens, and then around it you are going to create or place the one-to-many relationship. And then we need to make the connection between them. The challenge here is the following. I need to find a specific column here, header, that is equivalent to the same one in the transaction. So if I go to the transaction now, and I look at transactions, in the transaction, I only have a date, account, actual, and budget. And if I have the cities, I have the city code, city, country. None of these will match. However, I know that in the account, the last 3 digits or characters are actually the city code. Here's the city code. So how can I do that? I can actually now, in the transaction, I can pull the last 3, put them in a new column, and I call it city code. And in that, I can then link between the city code and the transaction city code. And that we'd have made the connection. And the same thing applies to the reference, expense reference, the dates, and the department reference. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go back to the calculated column. This is something that we've done in Excel. So I'm going to go back to the data models. I'm going to go transactions, and here we go. So if I want to pull the last 3, I'm going to use equal right. So equal right, and then I want to go to that account, comma, I need to pull the last 3 characters and close the bracket. This is regular Excel. This is what we, in Excel, we use the right, the left, the mid, the upper, the proper. There's a lot of functions. And then I'm going to call it here. It's called calculated column 1. I'm going to call it what? I'm going to call it city. I'm going to type this better, city. There we go. And then I'm going to go pull out the first 4. The first 4 are actually the department code. So if I go into the department reference, here we go, the first 4 is the department code. So in the transaction, I'm going to go here, I'm going to say equal left, select the account, comma 4, close bracket. There you go, calculated columns. This is called department code. And then I'm going to pull the middle one, 58055 is actually the expense code. So if I go to the expense reference, these are the codes. They have matching corresponding numbers in the middle of the account. So I'm going to pull it out using the mid, equal mid. Comma, starting position is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The 6th character, comma, how many characters you want to pull out? 5. Close bracket, close. Here we go. So I'm going to change the title here to expense code. So as if I'm in Excel sheet and I just kind of massaged the account into department code, expense code, and city. Okay. Okay, so just allow me. Okay. 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 So now if I go back to the diagram view, and let me see. Oh, so these are updated, transactions updated, city code, department code, expense code. Now it says city here. I can go back here to the city. Instead of city, it's actually the city code. Here we go. And then I go back to the diagram view. Here we go, city code. So now I'm going to connect the city code with the city code. And I'm going to collect the department code with department code. And the expense code with the expense code. But then I have the month. So I'm going to go back to the data view and I'm going to go to the dates. Oh, here's the month. Okay, it's fine. In the transactions, there's the date. So I'm going to go over here and say equal month and just select the month. So equal month, transaction date, close bracket, that's the month. Change this, the name, to month. Oops, again, I need to learn how to type month. There we go. All right, so I'm going to go back to my diagram view. You got month, and I connected. That's a diagram view. We've connected them. How did we connect them? We had to massage some of the data in Excel by performing some regular formulas. And then we went and we connected, we linked them. So it's one, you can see one to many. One to many. Each one of these is one to many. Now I'm ready to go. So I'm going to go now to pivot table, as you can see here. So click on pivot table. It says pivot table, but it's Power Pivot, because pivot table cannot take more than one source. Here I have 5 different sources together. Now let me stop here for a second. Any questions?
Hi, Ayman.
Okay. So you seem that you're all okay. Okay, so Nelly says, in the column add-ins, I found only Microsoft Power Map for Excel. How can I get Power Pivot? That's a good question, Nelly. The trick here, I'm gonna cancel this for a second. In Power Pivot, it all depends on really what Excel application you're using, a version you're using. If you're using 2010, 2013, you need to download the Power Pivot, or you need to have a minimum pro version of Microsoft Office, of Excel. So if you have the premium or the pro, you will have the Power Pivot already built in. You just need to activate it. Just double check on that. Okay, so we go File, you go Account, and you'll see the Microsoft subscription product. Is it, you know, for business or for pro? If it's a regular one, it will not allow you. Okay, good question, Nelly. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Okay, fair enough. Let's do now the, again, so I am at the manage. Here's my manage here. I have it there. It's in that same file, but it's not in Excel. It's kind of an intermediary location. Okay, now I'm going to go to pivot table. Okay, I can put it in any sheet, in the existing sheet, on a new sheet. Doesn't matter. I can put it in the existing sheet. Here we go. And I click OK. So now you can see here on the right side, you can see that you have now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different sources. If I click on this, these are the fields in every source. And that is magnificent. Why? Because I can actually go to the department name, and then I can go to a different source, like the transaction, and I say, can I put the actual here, please? It gives me the actual. And can I put the budget? You can give me the budget here. I can format these from here, or I can actually go back to my manage just to show you this. Here is the actual, here's the budget. If I go to the actual and I say, you know what, I want the actual to be a whole number, and I want it to be whole number with a comma separated, and for the budget, the same thing, whole number. Then if I go back to my Excel, these have been updated. So that tells me that I have a total of 110 million spending, and I have 141 million in budget. There's one thing that I'd like to do here. We do it in pivot tables, which is the design, report layout, tabular form. When I do the tabular form, it will remove the row label and will replace it with the field header. So now I have department, name, actual, and budget. If I go back to my scorecard, if you will, or our game plan, so we've done the install Power Pivot, data model, calculated columns, diagram view. We've done the pivot table, which is really the Power Pivot. Now I have measures, DAX to create, and KPIs to create. So let's see how we can do that. I can always alternate. Here's my Power Pivot. I can go back to my manage. I can add more sources here. I can create connections. I can go back to the data view. I can do some massaging here, regular formulas. I can go back to the diagram view, connect them. Once I'm done, I'm happy with this, I can go back to Excel. And then I can right click and refresh, and it will refresh all my connections with all the source. So now I have actual, I have budget. I need to create now some calculations. I'd like to create some measures. Measures such as what? So here you go, measures. I want to create some variance between actual and budget. I know the actual is 5.2 million. I know the budget's 6.5. What's left in the budget? So I need to create that measure. new measure. So that measure is going to sit where? I have 5 different connections. I want to put that in the transaction. I can put it anywhere I want. It's just, common sense. You want to put that measure in where it belongs, which is the transactions file. The name of it is going to be variance. And the description, this is to calculate the difference between budget and actual. And then it says, what's the formula? That's DAX formula. It is not very intuitive. You need to practice with it a little bit. A lot of support. As I told you, we'll give you that link where you can have all kind of formulas. And as you practice, you will develop that competency. Basically, what I want to do here is I want to say the sum of what? I want the budget. So I'm going to type budget, and you can see there are 2 budgets. There's 2 fields called budget. One is budget, and the other one is transaction budget. The first one, because I am in the transaction file, is just going to show you the fields in that transaction file. And the other one is, it's telling me go to the file called transaction and bring the field called budget, which is really the same thing. So if you want to move this around, the measure around, then you would want to select transaction budget, because you specifically go to the transaction file, bring the budget field. Why do you do that? Because maybe in some other files, there's a field called budget. So you want to differentiate between the transaction budget and some other budget. So I'm going to select transaction budget. And if you get very comfortable with this, you can just select budget, because you know it belongs to that same file. Okay, so I'm just going to make it simple, budget minus sum of actual. Here we go. Oops. That's the actual. I'm going to close the bracket. And then I'm going to check the formula, and it says no errors in formulas. Because of, I'm okay with this, I'm going to go say, okay, the result should be a number, should be a decimal, no decimal places, and use 1000 separator. Click OK. Here's the result, variance. And I create another measure, and that other measure is called variance percent. So I'm going to go to measure, new measure, and that is called, it's in the transaction table. I'm going to call it percent variance. I'm going to put any description there. Now the percent variance is a measure divided by a field. So the measure is called what? It's called variance. And here we go, it shows up. And here's the description. Remember, we had created a description that's called, this is to calculate the difference between budget and actual. So that's the one that I'm doing. So the variance, or I should say sum of variance, right? Sum of variance divided by budget, sum of budget. Sum of budget, close bracket. And then I'm gonna check the formula. Oh, so it says, no, you don't need the sum here. So you just need the variance. Check the formula. Formula is fine, click OK. Here's the result. Now, I can actually go back to the measure, percent variance, edit, and I want it to be a number. I want it to be a percentage, 1 decimal, click OK, close. Here we go. So now I have a complete table. I'm going to stop here for a second. Do you have any questions?
There is a question, Ayman.
All right, so there's a question from Mr. Al-Bandari. Says, why you use the sum in the function? Is it because the file is not in the department name? No, not really. The sum is very important because this is a calculated field. So what you're doing here, you're saying that I want for every row, I want the difference between the variance, the budget, and the actual. if I don't create the sum, it is not going, is going to create the formula, but the summation is not going to work, especially when you're doing division. Here, what we're saying is sum the whole difference divided by the whole budget. And that would be appropriate calculation. Otherwise, I cannot add percentages. I have to calculate percentages on the totals. Especially now, we're going to do slicer and you're going to say, show me the budget variance with only for a specific quarter or a specific department. So if I have the sum, you can say, oh, so sum that specific department of actual minus that specific department for budget, and that would be the result. And then break it up to where it belongs, by month, by quarter, and so on. Great. Another question from Asma says, we make measures for what? You can make measures for any calculation you like, because in this situation, I have an actual, I have a budget, and I would like to create a measure. How do you do that? I cannot create measures outside pivot tables. So it has to be done within pivot tables. Otherwise, problems is gonna happen left, right, and center. So how do we create the measure? So measure really are formulas. I just in a fancy way in Power Pivot when you say measures. All right, so that's why we do measures. We create measures for any formula we like. Okay, I hope that answered it. Okay, great, excellent questions. Any other questions, please feel free. Okay, all right, so here we have created the measures. Now in these measures, I can always go back to the measures, I can delete them, I can create new, I can edit the measures. Because see the variance here, I did not use the sum because the variance already been summed. Here you go, the variance is actually the sum of the budget minus the sum of the actual. The calculation has already been done. Okay. Any other questions? All right. Okay, great. So the last thing that we have to do here is really going back to our roadmap. And you can see here what I need to do now, KPIs. So let's see how we can do that. So now let's suppose I'd like to highlight any percentages below 19% in probably red, anything between 19 and 22 in yellow, and above in green. How do I do that? Then I can create KPIs. There you go, a new KPI.
Hi, Ayman. We have a question over here.
So now the KPI is for the percent variance. I can create for any fields. I only have two fields here, two measures that we've created. So I want it for the variance, percent variance. And the percent variance is the absolute value is 1. 1 is 100%. Yeah, we have a question from Sultan saying, can I compare to Excel as Power Pivot? If you don't mind, Sultan, you can just elaborate just a little bit. I would appreciate it. Thank you. Now we have another question from Muhammad says, is it necessary to arrange the data through table in every workbook? No, it's not. You don't have to arrange the data if you don't need to. We've rearranged the data so that we can create links between the transactions and the source document so that we can link them, and then we can create all kinds of reports. Okay. All right. So let's see here in the key performance indicator. So percent variance, the absolute value is 1 because I'm working with 100%. So 100% is 1. And then you can see here, I can move this around, or I can just put in the numbers here. So I said I wanted anything below 19%. So it's 0.19, you can see that, enter. So you go 0.19, anything below 19% in red, between 0.19 and 0.22, enter, it is, or maybe make it 2.5, sorry, 2.5, okay? Make it yellow, anything above 2.5, make it green. And then I can select any of these. And I click OK. And then I get something very strange. I get, zeros and ones. Why do I do that? Well, it's just an awkward way. Here's the variance that you created. See, you can see on the right side here, KPI, it's like a traffic light. Now, when you click on the traffic light, it says status here. So the only thing you need to do here is uncheck, check again. And that will give you your KPI. So the nice thing about this now is you've completed a model here. You went from raw data in 5 different sources. You pulled them in using the data model, Power Pivot for Excel. So you went over here to Power Pivot, you went to Manage, you went to from other sources, you went to the source itself, you pulled it in, and then you created 5 sources, you can see here. The second thing you did is you went to the diagram view and you were trying to establish connection between them, and you found out you couldn't find the connection. So you had to go back to the data view and figure out what kind of connections. We saw that in cities, there are city codes, and in the transactions, the city codes were the last 3 characters. So I pulled out the city code here, and I pulled out the department code, and I pulled out the expense code and the months.
I have a question.
Then I went back to my diagram view, and I said, okay, then let me make the connection. So I took the expense code. So I'm just gonna go this one here. I'm gonna delete it. And then I'm gonna go and link it again. So expense code with the expense code. That's what I've done. So I created the links between those 4. Then I went back to pivot table, and I said, I can do pivot table, pivot chart. I can do all kind of types of pivot tables. This is the pivot table. Create the pivot table on the same sheet. Here we go, and I get all these sources. Collapse all. So you got 5 different sources. From these 5 sources, you can see I've only used department reference and transaction. What if I want to add something else? I can go to the dates. I can take the quarter and I can put it here. There you go. So Q1, here's the breakup. You see how easy that is. I can remove that and say, no, I would like to do it by country. You can take the country, you put it here. I can take out the department name, as you can see. So these are the countries, how much I spent, the budget variance, and the percent variance, and the KPI applied there. I can
we have 2 questions.
I can keep the country. I can put the city inside the country, and so on and so forth.
We have 2 questions, Ayman, to answer, please.
Okay, we have a question from Bandari again. Thank you very much. When we create the connection, it will only be in the Power Pivot and no change in the actual file. That is correct. That is correct. That's a good question. The source file, let me show you the source file. The source files are here, really. These are my source files. Just move them. Here we go. The source files are these 5 files. Now, these 5 files are coming from somewhere, okay? You're going to take these files, you're going to put them in this folder, and you're going to update them. You update them every day, every hour. It doesn't matter. But as soon as you update them, okay, you just open your integrated file, if you will, the Power Pivot file. So I'm going to go File, Save As, and I call it my Power Pivot file, right? And put it on the desktop, for example, and I call it my Power Pivot. Here we go. So you open this file, and the only thing you do is right-click, refresh. When you refresh, what's going to happen? The Power Pivot here is going to go to the 5 sources. It's going to pull the newest information. It's going to put them in this pivot table. It's going to refresh the data, recalculate the variance, the percent variance, and they're going to give you the new variance KPI. So if I take this back here and I put my department name, here we go. Okay, so yes, no change to the source file. This pulls from the source file. Another question from Asma. Thank you, Asma. Can we make charts for big data in Pivot? Yes, absolutely, you can do that. That was my last kind of technique here. So once you do that, I'm going to do a couple of things really. So just to make it simpler, I'm going to take the department out. I'm going to put the city, okay? And in that city, I'm not going to keep the percent I don't want the KPI, just going to remove the KPI. I'm going to take the variance out. I'm going to take the budget out. I'm going to take the actual out. I'm just going to keep the variance. You know, what's left in the budget. And then I'm going to go insert. And then I'm going to create a chart. And that's my chart. Here we go. But on top of that, I'm going to go to my pivot again. And I say insert slicer. And I'm going to create slicers for quarter. I'm also going to create a slicer for division. I'm going to create a slicer for, where is the, well, it's fine. Here we go. So you have two slicers, all right, divisions, and for quarters. So now watch what happens. So give me the information for the cities, variance, availability of budget for Q1 for finance and admin. Here we go. And I can clean the data just a little bit here. I can remove all that. I can just add the percentage over here, hide all field buttons, make it a little bit nicer. Maybe I can remove the grid lines. Okay, I can put this like that. And maybe make this bigger. And then you can perform the analysis however you like. The nice thing about this is connected directly with the source. Somebody's working on the source. They can do that simultaneously. They update the data. The only thing you do here is right-click, refresh. But I want to show you one last technique, which is extremely important. I hope that answers the question, Asma. Thank you for the question. One last technique, and then I'm going to answer a couple of other questions. When I go to the pivot table, and I go to the data properties. All right. So these are the properties. You can see these are all the properties. That's the data model. I can click on properties, and there are, you know, things that you can do here, right? And you can pull from. Okay, this is for kind of advanced level. We don't worry about it that much, but it's important for you maybe in the future when you start working with Power Pivots that you can work on. Okay. A question from Bassam. Thank you, Bassam, for the question. It says, how can we handle format error coming from the data file in the data model? Very good question here. Let me go back to the Power Pivot, manage, and the problem is going to happen here. As if you're working in Excel. So if you have a problem here, if you have a problem with a source here, then what you can do is you can do an if statement. It says if error, then give me something. For example, equal if this number is less than 20,000, comma, then give me no value. For example, just to kind of demonstrate that for you. Give me 5,000, put 5,000 in close bracket. Okay, so it's doing the calculation. You can see that. So it looks at any number that is below the 20,000 and will replace it with 5,000. The same thing apply with errors. So you have an error, you can say equal if error. Here we go, if error. And if there's an error in this number, then what do you want to do? Then you can say 0 or NA or check that number. So you press enter. And you can see because there are no errors, it's just going to repeat these numbers again. I hope that helps. Sam, thank you for the question. A question from Sadiq says, I missed the introductory stage, but is there a way I can link different pivot table with some few similar variables? The linking, as we said earlier, it happens from the following: from Power Pivot, manage. That's where you link. So you go to from sources and you can pull all your sources. You can pull a source from Access, another source from Excel, another source from a text file, another source from SQL, and all of them will link up into the diagram view. And then you will create the connection between them. Bear in mind, in the data view, you need to have a primary key that links every reference with the transaction file. Okay. You're welcome, Asma. I appreciate it. Thank you for your comment. Ahmed, question: what if I change? So yes, we've talked about this, Ahmed. I will have to just double check on that to see exactly the technical reference to changing while the files are closed. Because if the files are closed, you want the new source is not going to be able to see the result, will not be able to see the source. So we have to recreate the link again. Okay. Okay. Seems that we have no more questions. We have come to the end of this webinar. As you can see here, that was our game plan. We have hit every part of it. We've checked it off. I hope you liked the webinar. You can always go to www.viftraining.com. You'll find all our webinars there. You can register from there. Automatically, you will get a confirmation and you can join the webinar. If you are interested in e-learning, you can find it under our website. If you're interested in virtual live, in-person, in-house consulting, everything you can find under viftraining.com. Wishing you a continued health and happiness in the next 2 weeks in Ramadan. And we hope to see you again. Thank you very much.